Okay, so you want to own a zoo. You picture baby giraffes, school buses unloading, and the ticket drawer filling. You see the drive-through line forming every weekend, and steady memberships renewing. That's the picture. That's what the listing photos are designed to make you feel. Here's the problem. A credible tiger habitat often costs $3,000 before a single guest arrives. A zoo is not really an animal business. It is a ticketed attraction and compliance business. Understand that, and how it makes money and quietly loses money finally explains itself. We're going to build this from nothing, step by step, with your money. You're the owner. Your cash is on the table and the countdown's running. You've promised investors you'll open by summer, or the deal unravels. So which side actually controls your fate, the animals or the guests and rules? The answer will not be what your gut expects, and it changes everything. So what do you buy first, and what do you skip to survive opening? Here's the decision that trips people up. Your first irreversible move is land, because enclosures need space immediately. So how many acres and where actually set you up to win? Expect land, commonly at $5,000 to $50,000 per acre, location dependent. Perimeter fencing alone often runs $200,000 to $600,000 for basic security. You'll usually build or upgrade access roads, $80,000 to $250,000 installed. Parking for 300 cars can be $300,000 to $700,000 with drainage. Guest restrooms and septic upgrades typically run $150,000 to $400,000 each. Utility service upgrades often add $150,000 to $500,000 before first habitat. A modest hoofstock yard might cost $400,000 to $200,000, designed safely. Even light theming and safety glass panels add $100,000 to $300,000 per zone. Permits and studies add $10,000 to $50,000, and months of waiting. You guessed animals first, but the guest core eats budget before animals. ADA ramps, railings and paths quietly run $40,000 to $120,000 installed. You're burning cash monthly just holding land and drawings before building. Sounds great. Here's the catch. Before opening, animals need quarantine space that guests never see. So what does a proper quarantine setup actually cost and require? Isolation rooms with ventilation often add $80,000 to $200,000 per suite. Biosecurity sinks, footbaths, and washable finishes cost $15,000 to $40,000. Basic vet imaging and lab gear run $40,000 to $120,000 starting out. Backup power to keep life support running is $150,000 to $400,000. The part almost nobody budgets for correctly is quarantine build-out. $300,000 to $1,200,000. You'll need a USDA Class C exhibitor license under the Animal Welfare Act. Licensing fees are small. Compliance time and training are the heavy lift. By building these, you lock fixed costs in before any revenue arrives. You might wait months for sign-offs, paying interest and salaries meanwhile. Water lines, hydrants, and fire code upgrades add $60,000 to $180,000. Even washable wall panels for back of house run $12,000 to $30,000 installed. You thought exhibits first. Quarantine delays change what opens and when. And that's when the real number shows up. Open or not, people must care for animals every day. So who do you hire, and what do they truly cost you? Keepers commonly earn $38,000 to $60,000 annually, plus overtime and benefits. A full or contracted veterinarian runs $100,000 to $180,000 each year. Maintenance techs cost $22 to $35 hourly, and you'll need several. Guest services staff often cost $14 to $20 per hour seasonally. Health benefits can add $400 to $800 per employee each month. New staff require weeks of safety training and animal behavior fundamentals. Payroll typically ends up 45 to 65% of your total operating spend. Rotas cover weekends and holidays, overtime you can't avoid or reschedule. Volunteers help, but supervision time makes them far from free capacity. You'll staff up before peak season to be ready, burning cash early. You thought feeding animals was the big number. It isn't, proportionally. Unexpected sick coverage and overtime can spike payroll suddenly in bad weeks. Here's where the obvious mental model starts to break down. This is the turn. A zoo is not really an animal business. So, what actually eats your budget? And how wrong is the gut guess? In most credible zoos, feed is roughly 3 to 8% of spend. Payroll is usually 50 to 60%, dwarfing the food you imagined dominating. Inspections, safety drills, and guest systems quietly rival animal line items. Guests judge you on restrooms, shade, and lines, not rare species alone. Weather swings attendance, which drives revenue, not your carnivore feed schedule. The gut says animals first. The math says guests and compliance first. Staffing sits above utilities, with feed a far smaller rung than expected. When forced to choose, guest experience sustains you more than rare species. Capacity, throughput, and predictability explain solvency more than your species list. You run a fixed-cost machine that sells unpredictable attendance days for margin. Until fixed costs are covered, another tiger cannot save a rainy month. Your instinct wasn't dumb, it was incomplete, and the numbers correct it. So let's slow down and actually do the math. You get paid when people come through a turnstile and spend inside. So which revenue streams matter most, and how do they stack together? Memberships front-load cash, typically $85 to $160 per household annually. Food and beverage can carry 60 to 75% gross margins on busy days. Gift shop averages can be $5 to $10 per guest on strong weekends. Parking fees of $3 to $10 add pure incremental margin if permitted. Camps, education, and field trips bring $200 to $400 per child per session. Animal encounters and behind-the-scenes tours can fetch $40 to $120 each. Seasonal events extend hours, smoothing weather risk with after-dark attendance. Local sponsors contribute $10,000 to $250,000 for naming and promotions. Donations happen, but non-profits capture them at scale more than privates. All-in per cap commonly hits $22 to $32 on healthy attendance days. Memberships trade lower per-visit revenue for frequency and early-season cash. Rain crushes day tickets and food sales, but memberships cushion a little. That's the good news. Here's the volatility that comes right after it. This is where invisible costs accumulate, even while guests seem happy. So which quiet obligations keep stacking, and by how much each year? Manure handling and hauling can run $25,000 to $100,000 every year. Rendering and carcass disposal adds $5,000 to $20,000, depending on species. Electrified fence maintenance costs $10,000 to $40,000 annually to stay compliant. Life support filtration media and pumps add $8,000 to $25,000 per year. Liability insurance commonly ranges $150,000 to $500,000 each year for zoos. The second overlooked cost is wastewater and stormwater compliance, $30,000 to $120,000 yearly. USDA inspections recur, and corrective actions cost time and real money. Transfers and quarantine reopenings trigger overtime and lost exhibit capacity. Lightning and surge protection for life support runs $10,000 to $30,000. Avian flu or biosecurity events may force closures of entire zones suddenly. Utilities often escalate 4 to 8% annually, compounding into painful surprises. Downtime delays revenue, but costs do not pause the same days, which would have been fine, except when funding and compliance lag, the animals still need care daily. So what happens when a real facility can't keep up with the bills? Wildlife Way Station in California closed in 2019 after years of strain. Hundreds of animals needed relocation, a massive multi-year, multi-agency effort. Aging infrastructure and disaster risks outpaced available funding and staffing. Wildfire threats and compliance requirements compounded operational pressure severely. One-time donations help, but chronic underfunding breaks systems eventually. The lesson is not scandal, it's structure. Passion alone isn't solvency. Fixed costs and compliance outrun unpredictable attendance when buffers are absent. Weather enclosures stack losses fast when reserves and memberships are thin. When runway runs out, orderly wind-down beats desperate last-minute gambles. Choose safety and reserves over headline species until you're truly stable. If attendance drops 15%, which bills stop? None of them. You think yours will be different. The math says it won't be by accident. Read that again. Here's your starting point. Annual fixed costs of roughly $3.5 to $4.5 million. So how many visitors do you need, at what margin, to break even? Assume $4 variable costs per guest for processing, supplies, and chargebacks. That gives a contribution margin near $22 per guest on average. At $4,000 fixed costs, break-even is about 182,000 annual guests. But traffic is seasonal. You'll do 4 months heavy, 8 months lighter. Run 2 scenarios, 300,000 and 150,000 annual visitors against this model. At 300,000 guests, contribution equals $6.6 million against fixed $4.0 million. You'd see around $2.6 million to reinvest and reserve before debt. At 150,000 guests, contribution is $3.3 million, below fixed costs. That's a $700,000 operating gap before interest and capital spending. Debt service and capital upkeep can swallow good year surpluses quickly. Memberships help, but they do not erase weak weather months entirely. Holding 6 to 12 months expenses in reserves is survival, not luxury. So far so good. Now let's talk about what can go wrong. A zoo is not really an animal business. It is a ticketed attraction and compliance business. So is it worth owning, and who actually survives in this space? Build capacity, restrooms, shade and parking before headline species upgrades. Budget payroll first, then reserves, then exhibits, in that exact order. Many successful zoos are non-profits. Donors fund capital more willingly there. Accreditation paths are slow, but pay in credibility, safety, and sponsorships. Weather never negotiates, so diversify into nights, camps, and memberships. Respect fixed costs. Keep them lean till attendance exceeds break-even by far. Skip any gimmick that harms safety or credibility to chase short-term cash. Daily excellence sells tomorrow's ticket more than rare species ever will. If you reach 280,000 to 350,000 guests annually, ownership can work. But it requires capital, patience, a strong team, and deep reserves. It was never really about bottle-feeding cubs and buying rare species. It's about capacity, safety, weatherproofing your margins, and memberships compounding predictability. Subscribe if this saved you $1 million mistake, and tell me, aquarium's next?